everyone, and welcome to the Sangamon Experience. My name is Ann Mosley. I'm the director and curator here at the UIS's Sangamon Experience. And today I'll be talking to you about our community trailblazers of women and activism. All month we've been highlighting different women from throughout Sangamon County that have fought for equal rights and have cared for their communities and have done a lot of great work and have lasting legacies here within the Sangamon County region. So today, I'm going to talk about some of the ladies who have a rich history here in the Sangamon County area through their activism, through social justice, gender equality, as well as justice in regards to equal rights. So I'm going to share my screen here with you. Oh. Let me try this again. All right, here we go. Now, the Sangamon Experience has a rich history of showcasing people who have come from different backgrounds, both as immigrants, migrants, but also individuals who have traveled throughout their lives throughout the United States. And the women I'm going to be speaking about today come from various backgrounds, and a lot of these women started because they had encouraging partners with them. So the first woman I'm going to speak to you about today is Miss Martha Hicklin, who was married to Hezekiah Hicklin. And the reason why I bring her up is because Hezekiah was the first Black person in the county to hold public office. He served the Sangamon County Board of Supervisors. And he was casting votes as an assistant supervisor from Springfield's 1st Ward as of August 28th of 1874. And it is not clear when he took office or when he left, but there was a lot of speculation about his election, and the State Journal ended up writing quite a bit about it. And if you look at a lot of the articles that have been written in the Sangamon link, you will get a better understanding of the rich cultural history of the Hicklin family. This family had the earliest successful Black politicians that took leadership roles within Sangamon County and led local civil rights and African American history movements. Now, I'm going to be speaking about women today, so not men. So sorry, Hezekiah, I'm going to have to speak about you another time because I'm going to talk about his wife, Martha. Now, there is no image of Martha that I was able to find. I was able to look on Ancestry, MyHeritage, and she actually offers more questions than answers about her legacy. I had to dig quite deep in order to find her. But in the Sangamon link, they have an image from the Sangamon Valley collection of the ward that Martha and her husband took great pride in. And this particular ward, you'll be able to find near Monroe Street and Adams. So when looking at the history of Martha, we find that she had close ties with the Illinois State Historical Society. But what I thought was the most interesting was that she was also on the Illinois Colored Historical Society. And in all my years of studying Central Illinois history and the state of Illinois, I have never come across the Illinois Colored Historical Society. And in speaking with one of my friends, she said that she came across it maybe 1 or 2 times, but it doesn't really come up too much in the record. And so in looking at our local history, we discover more than we thought. And when questions like this get asked within the record, it makes me actually kind of excited, because this means that this is an area that has not been covered before, and there's an opportunity to dig deeper into it. So Martha was a part of the Illinois State Historical Society and the Illinois Colored Historical Society, which I know the Illinois Journal writes a few articles on it. But what's also really neat is she took prominent roles within these two societies, as well as the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Now, this is a union that I'm very familiar with, because there were quite a few women's temperance movements throughout central Illinois. It was a big movement, especially in the 1840s and 50s. And actually, Abraham Lincoln was a part of the temperance movement. But we'd see a resurgence of this in the 20th century when Prohibition would come through. Now, with her being a part of a number of these civic positions, it shows that she was a woman of influence, a person of means, but also showcased that her husband had powerful sway within the Springfield area. And one thing I find very familiar about Martha is the fact that she was on the original board for the Lincoln Colored Home. Now, for those of you who missed our episode last week, we spoke quite a bit about the Lincoln Colored Home and the Home for the Friendless. And in talking about it, we focused on the original creator of the Lincoln Colored Home. But we failed to mention that Martha was the treasurer, the original treasurer of the Lincoln Colored Home. So she played a role in working with her husband to make Sangamon County better for its citizens, but also making it better for the Black citizens of Springfield, Illinois. During the time that she was living, she would have been around when the 1908 race riots happened. She also was living in the area when the Civil War was happening. She was actually born in 1864. So she wouldn't have remembered the Civil War, but she would have remembered Reconstruction and its effect on northern states, specifically here in Illinois. And what's fascinating in reading her story, there's a lot of gaps in it. She played a huge role in the social aspects of central Illinois, but she didn't leave a paper trail for us to follow unless we look within the membership records or even the minutes of the societies that she was a part of. But we can tell from what is available that she had a close relationship with the de Florevilles. So William de Floreville, he was also known as Billy the Barber, and the Hicklin family were quite close. And they worked together to try to build a better community that was very welcoming and open to Black individuals living within the Springfield area. So I bring her up because she asks a lot of questions. And these are questions I'm hoping to discover as I dive more into her story. But if you do have any information about the Hicklin family, I would be very interested to learn more about this particular political climbing family. They sound very fascinating, and there's not a lot written about them. So there is definitely opportunity for research and discovery there. Now, when Martha was living, she didn't just become friends with the Floreville family. She also reached out to other prominent white women within her community. And I found this very interesting because during this time, there was a lot of split with civil rights activists during this time, especially in groupings of women. The women's suffrage movement during this time was starting to fracture. At first, they were fighting for freedom and emancipation, but eventually, when women's rights was not recognized during the 14th, 15th Amendment discussions, this is when you start to see women's suffrage groups starting to segregate. And this ends up happening as well with the Women's Christian Temperance Union. So Martha would have been able to see that fracture. So it will be very interesting to dive more into her story and find out how she was able to be a bridge between different organizations that split because of different views based on ethnicity. The next lady that I'd like to bring up today is Harriet Reed. She is a very interesting character. Harriet Reed was a woman who liked to shake things up quite a bit. She was a woman who was an arbitrator in 1918 with the Illinois Industrial Commission. During this time, the commission decided to hire more men than women, which she felt was very unequal. And so she was one of Illinois' earlier suffragettes during this time, but she focused a lot on workers' rights, especially women workers. During the time she was living, she focused on trying to gain more workers' compensation and representation for women. So when the Illinois Industrial Commission decided to hire more men than women during 1918, there was a series of protests by Illinois women during that time. The Women's Suffrage Amendment to the U.S. Constitution had been ratified only a few months earlier, and the commission had to react to what these women were protesting about, which is lack of equal representation. Now, Reid became the state's first female arbitrator. Back then, arbitrators, just like they are now, review workers' compensation claims before they're presented to the Industrial Commission itself. Her appointment set the precedent that women could not be denied state jobs solely basis on gender. She laid the groundwork for her campaign with a decade of activism in Springfield on the behalf of women's suffrage, labor unions, and progressive causes in general. Reid fought hard for the rights of women to be represented not just on boards, but also in unions and within the working class as well, making sure that they received the same rights and safety as the men who were a part of these industrial unions were fighting for as well. She played a leadership role in local chapters of the Suffrage Amendment Alliance of Illinois and the Central States Cooperative Society, as well as Springfield Public Ownership League, which supported municipal ownership of the water and light utilities, so what we would know as city water, light, and power. She also chaired the Sangamon County Women's Party, which earlier on I spoke about women in politics and discussed the Women's Party earlier on when they ended up appointing their first female to run for a board election of superintendents for schools. So you'll be able to go back and revisit that. Now, she held jobs with powerful United Mine Workers. If you're familiar with the Verdun mine and the strike that took place there, she was a part of the United Mine Workers that took part in the strike in Verdun. She was also working with a progressive known as Willis Spalding. If you're familiar with Willis, Willis was a individual who fought for unions and also coal miners. So if you're interested in Willis's story, I encourage you to look into it. And there is a connection to Spalding, which is a local town here in the Springfield area. She also worked closely with several organizations with Spalding, focusing on equality. And she also was close friends with his radical sister, Maidie Spalding Lee. In 1914, Reid was one of the first 2 women to file for a local government office as an assistant township supervisor. It was the year after women won the right to vote in local elections in Illinois. Now, she dropped out of the election before the ballot was even finalized. But she was in demand as a speaker on suffrage issues and topics like civic responsibilities of women. What's fascinating about this is she wrote speeches, but she also wrote a number of articles. For example, she wrote an opinion article about one of our favorite pastime hotspots here in Springfield, the Lake Springfield Beach. Now, the beach here I have the pictures from actually July 19th, 1970, but the beach looked quite similar back in 1916 when she wrote an opinion article about the new Bunn Park bathing beach. Now, what's so interesting about this is in the article, she was addressing the Springfield Park Board and their order that women must wear skirts when swimming in the new Bunn Park bathing beach. I found this article quite fascinating because she gets, it's quite funny the way that she writes about this whole situation. But she wrote in the Illinois State Register, quote, "Many people still consider a woman immodest unless she wears skirts to the ground and moves like a churn on casters," unquote. She goes on to suggest that men should try swimming in waterlogged skirts before demanding that women do so. I actually found this quite comical because if you do look at the attire that women wore in 1916, it was like they were wearing a full outfit into the water. And for those of you who enjoy swimming, it makes swimming a lot more difficult and was not just inconvenient and uncomfortable for women, but it was also a safety hazard. The more clothing you wear, the more cloth that you drape yourself in. When you go swimming, it drags you down. And so if you were to go out in deep water wearing these heavy garments, you could easily get tired and drown. So it was not just a fashion issue, it was also a safety issue for a lot of women during this time. Now, as she was working as an arbitrator for the state of Illinois, she caused the state, quote, "more trouble in the last 2 years than any other position in the state service," unquote. She was able to kick up quite a bit of fuss while she was working for the state of Illinois, especially when she took the state to become the arbitrator. One eligibility test was given in April of 1918. And 2 days earlier, one of the applicants had walked into the governor's office with a typewritten list of the questions to be on the test. When the commission administered the exam anyway, Loudon canceled the eligibility test. A second test was given that July, and that was the one on which Reid received the highest score. So she was familiar with the questions that were listed on the examination. When the Industrial Commission sought only male arbitrators in 1920, commissioners claimed women weren't up to the job's physical demands. The State Civil Service Commission at first certified Reid as the top choice, but faced with the Industrial Commission, she ended up having to take another examination after she aced the first one. Even though she was the top choice, the commission still was fighting to have more women represented on their commission. She also had to fight them on how they were able to represent women within the state. Now, before the new exams could be graded, after she ended up retaking the test, protests were organized by some of her friends, including Chicago suffragette Catherine Waugh McCullough. They started pouring in from around the state. So her friends and others came in to Springfield, Illinois, to the state register, who ended up submitting columns against what was happening to Reid. Now, they were directed by Willis Spaulding's reliable ally, V.Y. Dahlman, who took up Reid's cause. Now, I could speak more about Reid, but I want to encourage you to utilize the resources that we have here. But one interesting fact, when I was doing research on Reid, majority of her papers are actually at the Harvard Library, because you see her top connections received a number of letters from her and the causes that she had here in Illinois. And so she ended up writing quite a bit, and her letters have been saved over the years. Now, after Reid was made arbitrator in Springfield and lived here for a time, by 1937, she ended up moving up to Chicago to be with some of her friends who supported some of the same causes she was fighting for. She eventually was fired because of patronage, and she appealed, arguing that she was protected by the same civil service regulations under which she had been hired. But the Attorney General, Otto Kerner Sr., ruled that she was not a certified civil service employee, and was replaced by another woman, the daughter of former state Democratic leader Roger Sullivan. Now, eventually, Reid moved to Salem, Indiana, to live with her father and sister, and would eventually be buried in Salem Crown Hill Cemetery. Now, if you're interested in learning more about Reid, as I mentioned, her papers are archived within the Harvard University's Mary Earhart Dillon collection. And you'll want to make sure to spell her name with 2 T's, or you won't be able to find the collection. The next lady that I am bringing up today is Susan Lawrence Dana. Now, Miss Dana was a social climber here in the Springfield area, and we know her quite well for her famous home, which is now a historic site for the state of Illinois. Now, she was the daughter of Ruena Lawrence, who began work in his teens as a bricklayer helper. And he became a building contractor later, expanding into banking, livestock, railroads, and mines. So coal, silver, and gold. And he took a big role in the railroads here in Illinois. He also served as mayor of Springfield and president of the Springfield School Board. When her father passed away in 1901, he left his entire fortune to his only daughter, Susan Lawrence Dana. Now, Susan was a very unconventional woman of her time. She married 3 times. She supported women's rights, equality for African Americans. She followed in her mother's footsteps by supporting the Lincoln Colored Home, which I encourage you to learn more about and look at our past programs for it. Also look into some of the supporting efforts to preserve the home. I'm pretty sure if Lawrence Dana was around today, she would probably end up supporting it because she did during her lifetime. But she also was an advocate for social services and the arts. So she ended up becoming a very highly influential woman, thanks to the fortune that was left to her by her parents. But what she's most well known for is her home. Now, the home of Susan Lawrence Dana in 1908 is featured here in the Sangamon Valley collection. This is one of the images that they have on their digital collections page. So the home was built at 301 East Lawrence Avenue. And she pretty much gave Frank Lloyd Wright his first ever open checkbook project. She commissioned him to do it. And when he was designing the home, it reflected a lot of what she enjoyed, which was organic architecture, which is quoted here as a relatively flat landscape of the state of Illinois and a Japanese aesthetic to express that's expressed in Japanese prints. It's closely connected to the prairie style and contains more than 100 pieces of original Wright furniture today. If you go to the Dana Thomas house here in Springfield, you will be in awe of the different pieces that she collected and were created to fit the home. What I think is really neat about the house is the library in the basement. The library is quite a collection, but also the way that it's located, it has perfect lighting to sit in a corner and enjoy a good book. In addition, the house was made for large parties, and she actually had large parties at her home, most of them for suffragettes and civil rights leaders of the day. In addition to that, the house itself, so if you're looking at homes and you're looking for something to judge it against, if you judge it against the Dana Thomas home here in Springfield, it cost about $60,000 during that period. The work lasted from 1902 to 1904. And she ended up having around 35 rooms in the home, which include the bowling alley that I mentioned earlier, and a 2-story ballroom whose floor was cushioned by sprigs, and there were also 16 major spaces within the home. It includes a terracotta sculpture by Richard W. Bach and a fountain designed by Bach and Marion Mahoney Griffin, Wright's first employee and the world's first licensed woman architect. The home is very impressive. I know some of the things that I have mentioned within this discussion about her life, the home pretty much cultivates the feeling of Susan Lawrence Dana and the progressive movement that she supported. And the only thing I can say is that you have to see the house. No words can describe the detail that was gone and was put into it, but also the life that it brought here to the Springfield area. Now, Dana was a very interesting woman who involved herself in passionate projects that she felt would better her community and the state of Illinois. And she lived in the house until the late 1920s, and then eventually moved to a small cottage behind the home. She was hospitalized as incompetent in 1942 and died 4 years later. Now, the state now owns the home. It's open for tours, but they're also doing virtual tours if you're not comfortable going out and seeing it in person just yet. But I encourage you to take a visit. But also, there's a book called Susan Lawrence Dana, The Enigma in the Wright House, by Dana Thomas House volunteer Roberta Volkman, that I encourage you to read. There's so much to learn about her and the projects that she supported. But just her as a person, she's just a fascinating person to read about. Now, the next lady that I'm bringing up, I promise I have 2 more left. There are so many women in Sangamon County that have rich legacies here that are not discussed enough, and I wanted to include as many as I could. The next woman that I'll be presenting to you is one that I never knew about. I had to dig quite deeply into this person because she's kind of a little bit of a blip in the history of the Sangamon County area. So in January of 1907, there was a graduating class at Springfield High School that had 2 Black students who became valedictorian and salutatorian. But there was a lot of controversy about the appointment of these 2 students. Now, the woman that I'll be mentioning is a woman by the name of Josephine Snowden. And this is the picture of the graduating class from 1907. And her picture is down here. I tried to find the most flashiest of circles to showcase to you because it's kind of hard to see the image itself. Now, she was one of the individuals who was reported to have been announced as valedictorian. Now, the competition to become the top student of the class was followed closely by the Illinois State Register. Now, both girls that were in line to be the valedictorian and salutatorian, however, were attacked quite a bit because there was a white boy in their class named H. Richardson Himmel, who improved during the final exam. And there were those who thought that he was the top ranked individual and that he took the place of Josephine. Himmel became valedictorian with a grade point average of 92.4, and Snowden, with an even 92.0 GPA, was named salutatorian. The other Black girl in contention was Hazel Bates, who fell to 5th in the class of 30 with a GPA of 90.8. So the Register ended up reporting January 29th, 1907, quote, "For some time, there was considerable rivalry among the various members of the class for the first honors. 2 colored girls were mentioned in a semi-official source some time ago as being the winners of both first and second honors. When the final counting of the grades for the 4-year course was made, it was discovered that Richardson Himmel, by a wonderful increase of his grades during the past 2 months, had forged to the front. There was considerable friction between the members of the class on account of the honors received by the colored members. Many of the boys refused to have their photographs in the class picture to be presented to the school, and it is rumored that some of the regular senior class affairs will be missing this year. This fact is greatly deplored by the members of the faculty who have been asked in regard to the showing made by the colored girls. This ended the quote of the Register, but the reason why I mentioned the whole article is because it was a story that really hit me, because there were a number of individuals who didn't want to be even featured within the article about the graduating class just because there were colored individuals listed as having better marks than they had. Snowden, the newspaper said, so this is Josephine, has worked hard during her entire term of school, and it has developed that it was only a fall in one of her studies in the last 2 months which kept her from leading the list of honored pupils. The valedictorian was greatly surprised when he was told that he had been the winner. Snowden eventually gave an address at the commencement ceremony, and the school board president, Dr. John Scott, gave her a special congratulations at the event. And even though she received a special congratulations, it was overshadowed by Scott's reference to hereditary efficiency coming off of the modern reader as a backhanded insult to Blacks in general. This is a fact that showcases within this, and it's surprising to see, but it shows the tension within the Springfield community during this time, because eventually, a year later, you would see the race riots take place within Springfield, Illinois. But she goes on to write within the commencement speech about what it was like for her. But it wouldn't be until her daughter went through school that she shared what her mother's experience was like. So to me, it takes time to pause to show the struggle that individuals within Springfield had, especially people within the Black population here in Springfield, Illinois, and a lot that they had to overcome because of the roadblocks that was put in their place. Later on, when she was interviewed, which was about 70 years after she graduated from Springfield High School, she goes on to tell the State Journal-Register reporter Fran Bernard, who interviewed her, she stated, "The teachers marked me down. Even my Latin teacher, whom I thought was so wonderful, marked me down. That was quite a humiliation." As we look at the experience that Josephine Snowden experienced, it's no wonder that we see her daughter, Vesta Nichols, become a civil rights activist, a state employee, and a well-known local vocalist, and was named Sangamon County Senior Citizens Hall of Fame winner. Her granddaughter became a Springfield physician, and her grandson was named Rhodes Scholar in 1977. As of 2013, her grandson became an anesthesiologist and a chief medical officer and outdoor recreation activist in the San Francisco area. If you want to learn more about her story and her experience, I encourage you to check out the Sangamon Valley collection. They have the articles from the Illinois State Journal Register from January and February of 1907. And there's also a collection called the Albert Meek File. And if you're wanting to dive into more of what the experience was like during the year that African Americans attending Springfield High felt, I encourage you to look into her story. She also has an oral history account that's been recorded. Now, the last person I will mention, she is an individual I've heard off and on about, but growing up, I never really heard much about her until I started diving more into our local history and looking at the Black individuals within the Sangamon County region. And this woman's name is Ruth Ellis. She was an open lesbian woman. And she, at the time that she was living here in the Springfield area, most women who were lesbians here in the area didn't really speak out much. They kept quite quiet just because of the nature of the area here in Springfield and the lack of welcome that was received here. Now, she spent 40 years of her life here in Springfield and 60 more in Detroit. In 1999, there was a movie that was released called Living with Pride, Ruth Ellis at 100. And in 1999, she was the oldest known out African-American lesbian. Now, she's also listed within the Michigan Women's Hall of Fame in 2009, and a memorial to her was placed on Chicago's Legacy Walk in 2013. There's also a center, which is a refuge for LGBTQ youths in Detroit that was dedicated in her honor. And her legacy has been told through movies, through individuals who knew her, but also by the LGBTQ community here within the Springfield area. Now, her father was Charles and her mother was Carrie Ellis. Her father was Springfield's first African-American mail carrier, and she was mostly raised by her father because her mother died at quite a young age. Her mother passed away in 1912, and Ellis was born in 1899. Now, Ruth graduated from Springfield High School in 1919, and she realized while she was in high school that she was attracted to a woman. And that was written actually in her obituary. And you can find her obituary on Find a Grave. But the way her story goes is that in 1915, at the age of 16, she discovered that she had an attraction for her school gym teacher. After Ruth read Radcliffe Hall's book, quote, The Well of Loneliness, she researched the term homosexual in a psychology book. She discovered that feeling she had for women had a meaning, which was lesbian. She never did hide in the closet, even from her father and brothers. In an interview, she stated, quote, My father would let me have girlfriends over all the time. Nothing ever happened except one night I had this girlfriend stay and we made a little too much noise. The only thing my father ever said to me was, Next time you girls make that much noise, I will put you both out. She went into printing and typesetting by working for I.E. Foster and Company, which was a Black-owned print shop at 1210 South 16th Street. She met Celine Babe Franklin. She went by Babe, also of Springfield in 1936, and the two would be a couple for about 30 years. Her brother encouraged her to move to Detroit, where she would have more opportunities, and eventually Franklin, her brother, joined her. And in the 40s, sorry, not her brother, her significant other, joined her the next year. And in the 1940s, they established their own business, Ellis and Franklin Printing Company. Their home was known as the Gay Spot, and became a magnet for gay African Americans, male and female, who were not really welcome in gay bars in Detroit. The relationship between Ellis and Franklin deteriorated, and the couple broke up both as lovers and business partners in the late 1960s. Eventually, the Gay Spot was demolished during an urban renewal program in 1971, and Ellis remained physically healthy and very active, and moved on to an apartment complex for seniors. If you look at her Find a Grave obituary, you will find that there are a few records of individuals who viewed her as a mentor, a guide, a teacher, a parent, and notice that she was a modest, self-spoken woman. But the fact that she was comfortable with herself and she was able to make friends with everyone around her showed the power of her character, and showed how she was accepting of everyone. And so I listed her within this discussion because it goes to show the power of a life well lived. And Ruth Ellis showed that through her acceptance of others, but also in her fun personality and willing to just be herself. Some interesting facts about her. She danced, bowled, she loved to paint, play the piano, she loved photography, and was a dedicated activist for the LGBTQ communities, both in Detroit and in Springfield. But the best thing that we can say about her, and what I enjoyed learning about with her, is that she enjoyed her life and lived it to the fullest. So I will end our program with that. These activists were able to showcase the power of living a life that benefited everyone around them, but also showcased the power of activism within our communities. As always, I encourage you to go and visit Sangamon Link and check out the articles that they have there. A lot of the research that I do on these community trailblazing programs is digging through the Sangamon Link archives. In addition, the Sangamon Valley Collection has a number of wonderful photographs connected to these ladies, and their stories that have needed to be told and retold again, because a lot of times they get swept under the rug, or people just end up forgetting them. So I encourage you to seek out community trailblazing women within your neck of the woods. And if you find any that have not been mentioned on this program that you feel need more recognition, feel free to reach out to the Sangamon Experience at sangamonexperience@uis.edu. I hope you learned a lot this Women's History Month with us. And it is my hope that the next time we celebrate Women's History Month, we will be able to celebrate it together in person at the Sangamon Experience. But until then, enjoy the videos of these inspiring women that we've talked about all month on our YouTube page, Facebook, and on our website. And I encourage you to look out for more programs here at the Sangamon Experience. Thank you again for joining me this month to celebrate our amazing women trailblazers here in Sangamon County. And I hope you will tune in to our next program when we talk about poetry in Sangamon County. I'll see you next time, and thank you for visiting us.